Well, we appear to have a slight issue. The fuel is not getting through. But yeah, I'm not so sure. I think there's a blockage somewhere in the carburettor, but I could be wrong. Anyway, we'll have to just wait. We'll have a quick brew while we're waiting. At least it's a nice day. I spy a yellow van. Yes. Who's there? Oh, is there a little comma? Oh yeah, I see a comma breakdown wagon. Well spotted, Hal. You know, I can't help thinking there's something fundamental around the carburettor, or where the carburettor bolts through to the manifold. Trying.
Oh, I can hear the intake.
There's a lot of intake now. Well, evening, folks. Bit of a gentle tinkering session in the garage here at OCC HQ this evening. And you may remember that I had a little spot of bother with the Dodge pickup and fuel-related issues. Now, like I discussed at the time, I suspect it may be pulling in a little bit of air from somewhere, possibly around the inlet manifold, or maybe even the carburettor mounting gasket. We'll have to see on that one. But I thought, well, whenever you have a bit of a running problem and fuel starvation, you know, even despite my sort of initial thoughts, I think it's often best just to do the simplest things first. So I think in this case we will lift the lid on this Carter carburettor, which is standard fitment on one of these old Dodges. It's held on with 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 flathead screws, so that's fairly easy to whiz off. And I mean, we have got a bit of linkage going on here, so we can only sort of move it to the side a bit, but that will reveal the float chamber on there on the right hand side, the float and the 2 jets that meter the fuel supply. And like I say, always do the easy jobs first, just in case that's what the problem was. So I will go and get a screwdriver, and I think we will carefully remove the lid of this old carburettor. I'm not entirely convinced about the linkage. I don't think it's related to the problems that I had the other day, but I still can't quite get my head around this choke linkage, because it doesn't seem to fully open and close the butterfly for the choke when you actuate the choke knob on the dashboard. So I need to have a bit of a look at that and see if something needs adjusting somewhere. But first, let's get this off, and then we'll have a look inside, see if there's anything obvious. I notice there's a little bit of sediment, a bit of muck in the bottom of this fuel filter here, so that's again something we'll have a look at, just in case there's a bit of muck got into the jets somehow. But yeah, let's go and do that anyway. Hopefully over here we'll have a screwdriver of some description. Yeah, that one's a little bit bent. That one is okay, I think. So let's make a start on this. Carefully undo them a little bit at a time, because you don't want to warp, because this is only some sort of like pot metal. It's nothing particularly high quality, it's just your regular stuff. So we'll just sort of crack them open a little bit at a time, just so that we don't risk distorting anything. There we go. And also put the screws in such a way that they'll go back in their original holes again, because from time to time sometimes you find some screws are longer than others, and the last thing you want to do is wind in a long screw into a thread that is designed for a short screw, because you could end up cracking something. That would be very, very bad indeed. Right, let's get this taken off. What would also be very bad is to drop one of these screws on the floor. I've got some cardboard down there, which is always a good idea. So we'll take that one out. I've loosened them all off so they're all finger tight now. There we go. Little sort of pan-headed screws, is that what you call them? Something like that. Right, so pop that over there in this little tray. We'll try and keep them in order. I'll do that one over there. All good fun, all riveting content, I know, but it was a bit of a shame that when we went to the Royal Oak it decided to stop behaving, to stop running, which was a bit of a shame. There was quite an audience there, but you know, that's just one of those things, isn't it? I've been to enough shows now to know that from time to time cars do fail, even and sometimes they fail in very, very public locations. As I think I explained in the Tatton Park video that I did, the Austin Devon decided to throw off its timing chain just as I was exiting the car park at Tatton Park many years ago in the mid-2000s. So that was quite exciting, and the bright yellow recovery service also took me home on that occasion, but there was no fixing that at the side of the road. It was all fairly terminal. Right, so I'll pop that down there. Is that all? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that going to come off? There we go. Now I have to be a bit careful because there is an accelerator pump in here somewhere. So I'm just going to move it off to one side without hopefully damaging anything. And there's also a very, very thin gasket in here, so we don't want to go stuffing that up either. Okay, so that's moved off to one side, safely out of harm's way. There's the accelerator pump, the little thing with a spring on it there. You can see that there. And when you give it a bit of throttle when you're driving along, that squirts an extra squirt of fuel in to the carburettor itself. This is the float chamber. This is the float. So the fuel is pumped up through here, through this pipe, via this fuel filter here, which is an add-on. That's like a period add-on. And this is the float. And this rises up as the fuel comes in. And then somewhere under here, there should be a little needle valve, and that restricts the flow. Oh, there, sorry, there's the. So as the float comes up, it closes off the needle valve which is in there, and that stops any more fuel coming in, because otherwise fuel will pour everywhere, because it could just keep pumping in, which would be less than desirable. Now what I need to do, there's a little spring thing here. There's like a springy bit of metal, a U-shaped piece of metal there, and if you carefully pull that out, that is what holds the float in. So if we pull this up with a screwdriver, that, I won't do it single-handedly, but that comes out, that comes up, and then that releases the float, and we can pull that out. So if I carefully pull that out, hopefully it won't go pinging off anywhere. There we go, that'll do. And then we'll just pull that out gingerly. There we go. So there's the little clip. Put that safely over here for now. Apologies for the lighting, it's a little less than ideal. We'll get some, just grab that. You can see the little needle valve is just in there. As the float lifts up, as the fuel bowl fills up, it closes that off. So if we can just grab that. There we go. So that is the float. Apologies again for the lighting, it's not ideal, but hopefully you get the idea. While it's off. That sounds, funnily enough, that sounds as if it's actually got fuel in it. Let's just, I don't want that pin to fall out, so we'll just take that out. I don't know if you can hear that. Can you hear that? That's actually got fuel in it. So, now, let me think. If this has got, look at the level. I noticed when I took the lid off just now, and I only had it running yesterday, the fuel level, damn, there goes the light. Let me just go and sort that out. It's all a bit, so all a little bit Heath Robinson in here. Let's just try and get this something like right. Right, where was I? So this has fuel in it. So that means it's never going to rise. It's also pretty dirty in there actually. But I'm just thinking, the problem yesterday was all to do with fuel starvation. And if the fuel bowl has very little fuel in it because this is stuck down, but you'd think therefore that it'd flood, but maybe it didn't. What I'm going to do for now is just get a rag and absorb and remove the fuel that is in there and just pull the jets out just to give them a little bit of a clean out. I'll also clean the bottom of the bowl because, like I said, where's my screwdriver gone? If we can have a look in there, it looks a little bit mucky in there. Again, that may or may not be the problem, but either way it's not ideal, so let's go and clean that out. Yeah, so I've got a theory that the fuel bowl was never really filling up sufficiently. The level was way down when I took the lid off here, and that made me a little bit suspicious. I'm just going to take this jet out here. I've just done that with that. I'll be putting it back in with this rather than using a socket ratchet itself, because you get quite a swing on that and it'd be very easy to over tighten this. It's only a little brass jet inside a monkey metal housing, so at least with this one you get far less leverage and there's much less chance of being a bit ham-fisted and breaking something. There we go, so that's the jet out. It's only a little thing. Actually, I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick that up. It doesn't appear to be blocked. Might try and blow a bit of air through there while the jet is out. Maybe there was a bit of a restriction in there. Again, something else that is very easy to lose. I don't think the camera's liking this low light very much, so we will put that safely, he says, over here. Right, so there's all the bits in there, but yeah, I'm gonna need to get another one of these floats. So I've cleaned it as best as I can in there. Where's the other little light? Where's that light? Here we go. Right, there we go. So I made a start on cleaning it, and with the lid off, at least it'll evaporate. Whatever fuel is in there will evaporate. But I think I'm going to have to order another float from somewhere. Whether I can get one here in the UK or if I'll have to order it from the States, I'm not quite sure. I think this is a fairly common car to carburettor. I don't think there's anything particularly fancy about it, but it's just whether I can get one here or whether we'll have to ship one from abroad. I do not know, but that's quite interesting because, yeah, I think, like on an SU carburettor, you have the needle valve in the top lid, and it sticks down like that way, and as the float comes up it closes the needle valve off, and if this stays down and it's full of fuel like this, the needle valve stays open and the fuel just continues to pour in, then it overfills the float chamber, it all pours out the side. Now this, because the needle valve is horizontal sideways in there, I'm just wondering if it acts a little bit differently compared to the carburettors that I more normally fiddle with, and if that has stayed shut for whatever reason and fuel's not been coming in, and then the level was only really low down in here, I wonder if that was insufficient to fully feed the carburettor jets that are wanting fuel to go down them. So I'm guessing, I think that is possibly the problem. It's certainly a problem, because that is just going to cause all sorts of problems. Whether it's causing the problem, I do not know, but I think the first thing to do is do a bit of shopping and see what bits and pieces we can pick up for these Dodge carburettors. Like I say, it's produced by Carter. It says ball and ball carburettor, manufactured for the Chrysler Corporation, Detroit, Michigan, USA. So I'm guessing it's a pretty standard thing. Yeah, oh, that's quite interesting in a way. I can only think that somewhere on that soldered seam there is a slight leak, and that has been allowing fuel to get inside here, which is a very bad thing. Rather than dig out the big compressor, these little foot pumps, the little Kismet babies that I introduced in the previous video, these are actually quite handy for just blowing through where the jets go. This also needs to come out, but the jet that goes down there, I was able just to put that on it, cover it over, and give this a quick, like so. It blew it through just fine. Well folks, it's a couple of days later, and in the post today arrived this. Now, just to backtrack, this is the original float assembly. That's got a fair bit of petrol in it. This matches the diagrams in the factory workshop manual for the Dodge. This is also out of a Carter carburettor, wartime Dodge, but a slightly different model, but very similar engine. And if we actually compare them, they are almost size-wise identical. This is fractionally wider that way and fractionally longer. You can see that, but not as much that makes any difference. The important bit where the pin goes through, importantly, that is, let's get the light, that is the same. So I've sort of trial fitted this inside the float chamber, and I think this will work. I've had them both in a tub of water today. This one doesn't appear to have taken in any more liquid, and this one hasn't taken in any at all. I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't going to leak either. I mean, petrol can be a little bit more searching than water, but if no water's getting in, then at least it's worth giving it a go. So this evening's little plan is to pop this into the carburettor and just see if it'll work. Whether this is what caused the problem at the Royal Oak pub recently is open to debate, but just the fact that this is leaking tells me that that needs fixing, and it can only improve things replacing this. Now, I've seen some of these available new repro items available in the US, which are suitable apparently for ethanol based fuels, so longer term I might look at getting one of those. If we can find where this is leaking, presumably somewhere on this soldered seam, then that could also be resoldered perhaps, once any traces of fuel have disappeared and been removed, of course. But in the meantime, for now, I think I'm going to try this, and if this works, you can actually buy new old stock ones of these over here in the UK, because they, like I say, they were used on a number of military Dodges, and there are a few of those around. So yeah, it could well be that this slightly different float arrangement will do the trick and replace this one, which is punctured. But anyway, let's go. I need to rig up some lighting. Yeah, that, I'll just put that up there for now. That will fit in there just nicely with a little bit of room to spare. Like I say, it's fractionally larger than the one that came out, but not enough to cause a problem. So I think we will install this, put some fuel straight in here, and then we'll see if we can fire the engine up. Okay, well that's the replacement float assembly in. There's a little sprung pin. I'll just pop that gasket back on, that'll be good to go again. And then all we need to do is put the lid on, tighten up the screws slowly, a little bit at a time, just so we don't risk distorting the top. But first I need to go and find my little tin, my little bottle of petrol, and just top this up a little bit. What I did notice when I had the two sets of floats in the jar of water in the house, how much more buoyant these are, because the original one, as it's got a fair bit of liquid in there, old petrol, this one weighs down quite a lot more and it's much less buoyant than this one. You could really feel the difference, and yeah, this seems to bounce up and down as you would like. Probably a little bit full, but that'll sort itself out if it starts up. But I'm pretty sure we're looking at some form of fuel starvation the other day. Now there may still be a leak somewhere around the inlet side of things, but this had to be replaced regardless. So as soon as I found that, I thought, well, we need to do this before we do anything else. Okay, we'll just nip these up a little bit. Certainly access to the carburettor couldn't be much better than this. This one's just a little fiddly to get at, but can't complain too much, can we? Let's get that one there. I'll just try and pull it down evenly, because we don't want to cause any more problems. We'll just whiz those around a little bit at a time. We don't need to do anything heroic. Just nip them down. Make sure it's all seated properly and the linkages are all as they should be. Like I said the other day, I do wonder if something's a little bit funny here with the choke assembly, but that'll be for another day, I think. Just nip these up. I'll put the air cleaner on as well, because that will have the effect of leaning off the mixture a little bit. Let's just do this. Almost done. Be nice to get this one back on the button, even though it's only been a couple of days. I hate having things immobile. So the sooner it's back up and running properly, the better. Right, all back together. Fuel in the float chamber. I've not put any squirts of fuel down to try and encourage things. I'm just going for a regular start as close as possible. So let's go and connect up the battery, which lives under the driver's footwell just over there, and then we'll see if there are any signs of life. Right, so I'll normally do a little bit of choke, ignition on, a couple of pumps on the throttle just to get a squirt out of the accelerator pump. We'll go for a start. Okay, try again. Okay, nothing yet. I'm going to have another look at that choke linkage, because I don't think it's quite as it should be. This doesn't feel as if it's working properly. It doesn't feel right at all. So I'm just going to have a quick look at that. Right, so I've just manually jiggled the choke because it wasn't really coming on properly. Will it make any difference? Who knows? Trying just put the choke on fully. Probably rectified one problem, but I mean, this linkage, is something really screwy going on in this linkage because the choke is fully in now, but the butterfly is stuck right over there. It should be like that. So clearly there's something going on here. There is a little spring behind there. So that's with the choke off. And then as you so that should operate when you pull the choke. That should move that, which activates the butterfly. So maybe something's a bit out of kilter here. I'll have to have a bit of a closer look at that, but the main thing is it should have started. It was trying to start, but it sounded identical to when we were stuck in the pub car park with the chap from the AA, so clearly we're not actually much further on than we were before. Well folks, here's an interesting development. I've just taken a couple of plugs out. I don't know if you can see that. But they are actually soaking wet. I've wiped this one a little bit, but certainly the front two were soaking wet. Now that wasn't happening the other day in the pub car park. So that is quite interesting, because the other day they were all bone dry. So I'm going to whip out the other four. So quite easy to get at, it'll only take a couple of minutes. We'll clean all these up. Maybe it's just flooded a bit this time. Anyway, certainly worth a try. Once it starts, it sounds fine. I just can't help thinking that if there was a major inlet gasket leak, it wouldn't be running this nicely. Put a bit of choke isn't fully releasing. Doesn't make a great deal of sense so far, but we'll let it warm up and we'll switch it off and then we'll see how it goes once it's warm, and then we go for a restart. The fact it runs so well once it starts, it just wouldn't do that if there was a major problem with an air leak, a vacuum leak. What we like to hear, the smooth purr of that 6-cylinder Dodge engine. Now, what the problem is, I'm still not 100% sure. Cleaned up the carburettor and cleaned up the spark plugs even, and it wasn't too bad. It's a little bit reluctant, but I think there's definitely a problem with the choke linkage as well. Now, I don't think that was necessarily the problem the other day, but clearly again it's something that is now on the list and needs ticking off, I think. But for now, we'll just leave it run, warm it through a little bit, and then we'll switch off and then try again. Okay, well, it's started up again. This isn't closing off. When you accelerate, it'll move that over, but it's not going back, so it should be. It feels like there should be a spring, because when you operate the butterfly for the choke, it just stays there. And it feels like it should be operating against a spring, so that when you let go any pressure on the throttle, it pings back. You've got this actuating rod here that operates that. But it feels like when you let go of that, it should go back to there. But it just stays there. So that's going to overfuel things a bit, I would have thought. So again, it may not be the problem that we've been having, but it looks like it should be something that maybe we can try and experiment with. So we can find somewhere to hang a spring. There's a tiny little spring in there, but that's working the opposite direction. That's actually pulling it that way. But it doesn't feel right somehow. But I think even if we just attach a little spring down here, just to pull downwards, maybe to there, if that's got a little spring on it, not a very strong one, but just enough that when you take the pressure off, that pings back to fully open. I think that's probably a good idea. I've just brought Harley out, so that should be like that when the choke is off at the moment. So that should be like that, but it isn't, it's like that. So again, I think we need to have a bit of a pull down on that rod, just a spring on there. Right, so if you put the choke on, Hal, then put it off. Right, so it's not fully releasing. If I pull that little rod down, that's fully. Right, so if I just keep a little bit of pressure on this rod, right, put the choke on. Right, choke off.
Feels a lot smoother when you do that.
Choke on. Choke off. Somewhere in this little lot there will be a suitable spring. Let's see if I can get this open. There we go. If there isn't a spring in there, then there isn't one anywhere. maybe something like that would possibly do. Anyway, I'll have a bit of a fertile through there, see what we can find. So I think that'll improve matters a lot. Right, a couple of minutes later, and I've put a spring on here. You can see that there. This little spring. And that's attached at the top to this operating arm, which operates the choke butterfly up there. And I've just hooked it around here for now, and the vacuum pipe sits there. But now, if the choke is operated, that closes, and then as soon as you release the pressure, it closes. So and that's a fairly light spring, but that seems like that's how it should, I think, work, because previously this, as soon as you operate that, the butterfly wasn't going back again, whereas now it goes to fully off, which is what you want, surely. Am I missing something? I don't quite know, but I'm sure that's what it should be doing. It shouldn't just be sitting there with no way of going back off, fully off again. So otherwise you'd be running on partial choke all the time, which isn't going to be very good. So I think what we'll do, we will just refine, now that I've established that this spring in this position will actually work. I'll just do a neater job of attaching that at the bottom and just re-profile it a little bit so it fits properly on the operating arm just down there. And that should, my light's just gone out, that's handy, but yeah, that should improve matters a little bit more. Just give it a squeeze of the accelerator. Ignition on. Well, that seems fairly promising. So what have we done this evening? We've changed the float so that the right amount of fuel is in the carburettor. We've also improved the throttle and the choke linkage to make sure that the choke is fully releasing properly when it should do. And the fact that the plugs were getting wet early on when I went for a start tells me that there isn't a vacuum leak, there isn't an air leak on the inlet side, because the plugs wouldn't be getting wet, which is what we talked about earlier and indeed on Sunday. So really the last thing to do, that was a warm start, but really the last test to do is tomorrow we'll give a proper cold start and just see how keen it is to start up. Then that is the real acid test. It may just be a false dawn, the fact that it's running okay when it's warm, but even so, it was warm the other day at the pub in the car park and it was very, very reluctant to start up. So yeah, I think we're slowly improving matters. Okay, morning folks. Now today, new day, and this is the acid test really. Will it start from cold? I managed to get it to run yesterday evening and it would start up again once warmed through, but now we need to just see if it'll start on a regular start. I've got the keys, should be enough life in the battery, I hope. Air cleaner's back on. So yeah, so this is exactly as it should be. So we'll give it just a little bit of choke, the usual starting routine. We'll just see if we've fixed the problem or not, because you never really know. Yesterday's apparent successes could always be a bit of a false dawn. So we'll give it a bit of choke, about a centimetre of choke. I'm always very wary of over fueling things. I'll just give it a quick stab, single go on the throttle, and we'll go for a start. Well, we will once I've reconnected the battery, of course, so I didn't bring a spanner in with me. Just push it on there, see if that's tight enough. So much planning goes into these videos. Right. Okay, I'll just give it a fraction choke, give it another stab on the throttle. Okay, we'll just give it a bit more, because like I said yesterday, the choke mechanism looked a bit squirrely, so it may be that we need to relearn the start routine now the choke is working as it should. That's a cold start, just a regular, correct start, no fuel down the carburettor, none of those shenanigans. That sounds pretty encouraging. It's just a little bit more choke than it did before. Like I say before, the choke flap, when you rev it, it was kind of dragging the choke flap, the butterfly over with it. It wasn't fully shutting off again. So it's probably running a bit on the rich side before. On the oil pressure. Well, I think, although I don't like, I'm always nervous about counting my chickens, I think we are on the right track. If anything, sounds possibly better than ever, but I can only think that maybe there was a spring originally on the carburettor and it fell off while we've been driving it along at some point. And I noticed lately it has been a bit finicky getting it to start, plus the punctured fuel float wouldn't have held either, so I think the combination of the two things has been making it more and more difficult to fire up. But the signs are pretty promising. So I think going forward we'll just do a few more tests on other days just to make sure this isn't a false dawn, but the signs are, fingers crossed, we'll fix that one. Good. Right, well, there's been so much fiddling under the bonnet of the Dodge this week. I think it's only right and proper that we give it a proper little test run down the road. We were out in the pilot earlier, now it is the turn of the old Dodge pickup. Back safe and sound, a successful little run out. So it would appear the little mods and tweaks that I did this week over the course of maybe 2 or 3 evenings this week appear to have paid dividends. Obviously you never quite know until you've done a bit of mileage, but the signs are that she is behaving. So we had a bit of a run round, got it nice and hot. Now we've switched off and then I'm going to go for a hot start again in just a few minutes just to see if everything is behaving as it should do. You never quite know, especially with modern fuels. It's not quite the same as running on the old petrol they used to have back in the 40s, but yeah, you just work with what you've got. And I've got some super unleaded in it at the moment, which is slightly higher octane, and I think it probably just works just a little bit better in some of these older trucks and cars. But yeah, we'll see how it goes with a hot start in just a couple of minutes, I think. And my youthful assistant's kindly volunteered. Right, go on then, give it a go. Shouldn't need any of that. Just go for it. Showing what, 180 on the gauge.
40 psi oil.
Yeah, oil pressure's up, that's good. And we've got consistent oil pressure. Yeah, that'll do, I think. Another little job I had to do once I'd sorted out the carburettor, the linkages, the float and so on, was I noticed that there was quite a substantial oil leak from the top of the oil pump. The oil pump sticks out to the side of the engine block and runs across through to the other side and connects up to the distributor on the other side of the engine. And I thought I spotted a bit of a leak. And when I had a look the other evening while I was test running this, I noticed quite a consistent drip from the top of the oil pump. Now on the top there is a little cover plate held on with I think 5 small bolts, and there was clearly a leak. And I had a quick look in the workshop manual and it showed there is a gasket beneath that little top cover. So I thought, oh, maybe that must be leaking. So I actually I got some gasket paper and I made up a little gasket. This is my first attempt, made out of fairly thin gasket paper, and I thought, well, that'll work just fine. So I put that on and I did a bit of a test run of the engine, and I noticed, somewhat to my alarm, that there was 0 oil pressure. There's the oil gauge over there, and it was showing absolutely 0. So I just ran it for a few seconds and I thought, this isn't right, because the oil pressure comes up within a second or two of starting normally. So I thought, yeah, what could it be? I thought, has putting this gasket affected the oil pressure to that extent? Because there's 2 sort of gears that mesh and spin beneath this top cover, and that's what pumps the oil around the engine to sort of lubricate everything. So I thought, what I'll do is I'll take off the gasket I just made and just put the plate back on, because I noticed that there wasn't any gasket at all when I took the little plate off. Whoever had had it apart in the past, and it had been on there quite a long time, I think, they'd put it back together dry with no gasket or sealant. I mean, I don't like sealant, but there was no sealant, no gasket or anything. So that seemed a little bit odd. So like I say, when I put this on, I thought, well, that'll do the job just nicely, but no oil pressure at all. So I took this off, put the plate, just as an experiment, I just bolted the plate back on again, because I thought, oh God, what have I done? Have I done something that's wrecked the oil pressure, wrecked the oil pump or something? But fortunately, with just the plate bolted back on with no gasket, it worked properly again. The oil pressure came straight up, but of course, I still had the drip. So in the end, I had a bit of a dig around, and I found this old stuff, which again is proper gasket paper, but this is really, really thin gasket paper. I can't remember when I bought this, probably at the Cholmondeley Castle Classic Car Show many years ago, but I still had this tucked away, so I managed to find a flat piece, and I ended up making another gasket, same shape as that, but out of that. And this, I mean, I thought this was pretty thin, because I know the plate, when I took the blanking plate off, the cover plate off, I made sure that it was flat, because I know that sometimes if they're distorted, that can really affect the oil pressure as well. So I checked all that with a steel rule, and it was all okay. So anyway, I made up a gasket out of this very, I mean, you can see how thin it is. You can see the light through it almost. You know, it's that thin. So I made up a little gasket out of that, and I thought, well, I'll try that, and hopefully that'll work, because this is the thinnest stuff I've got around to make a gasket from. So again, I made up another one of these out of that, put it all back together, bolted it back together, and fingers crossed, and I went for another start, and mercifully it registered oil pressure again. So I thought, thank God for that, I haven't wrecked something. And the other upside is that now it's actually got a gasket under that top cover on the oil pump. It's no longer spraying oil out everywhere, so that's a real bonus, and that's something else that I checked after our little test run today, just to make sure that it was nice and dry around there. So, phew, another job ticked off the list. So there we go, the old pickup appears to be working again, and it may just be a bit of an illusion, but actually it seems like it may be running better than ever. But I'm just happy that it starts, stops, starts again when it's hot, and runs and pulls as it should do. And as a bit of a bonus, it's not leaking oil now, so that is all good. So thank you very much for watching this update on the 1947 Dodge pickup truck, and yeah. If you're new to the channel, please have a look around before you disappear. Think about liking, give it a like, subscribe, comment below. All those kind of things really help the channel. And there'll be many, many more videos on various cars and indeed trucks before too long. So bye for now.